Hey, you know cuz? We're back again. You know what time it is. It's the CarQuicks podcast time, and we got to get this going swiftly and efficiently. So, episode 65, CarQuicks podcast, season 2. I say it sometimes I don't, but regardless. How are y'all doing out there? How's everybody treating you? I got to get myself situated. How's everybody treating you? How's the family, the friends, the loved ones, the car bills, the car mods, the car channels, whatever you're doing automotive related, I hope it's going exactly how you intended and how you manifested. Because mine is, okay? That's all I'm saying. Things are looking real good over here on this side. So we're going to drive into the car news this week. And there's a couple things I want to talk about. Not heavy on the car news, but kind of heavy on opinions, right? Especially for me. I have some opinions I want to talk about when it comes to some of the things that are coming out. So let's just get into it. Here's one thing that was happening. Or actually, as of today, this recording, something that got announced that's fairly big news, because this is a very expensive car. It is a very well-known car. It's a very much an iconic vehicle in the American sports car realm. And that's the Mustang. So everybody knows the Mustang, nothing new. We got the brand new one. We got the GT, dark horse. We got the GT. We got the regular ones. But there's a very specific one that everybody has been talking about, and that's the GTD. And the reason why is because it is certifiably the most expensive Mustang, probably production-wise. I don't want to say ever, because I'm sure there is some very much, VIN-matched low miles GT350 or GT500 from the 60s that can get up well above whatever this price point is, and that's $325,000. Now, before, we've already talked about the GTD, so I'm not about to run down the list of it. If you haven't heard about this car, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, first, welcome. 2, you got to go look it up, okay? Mustang GTD. Now, one of the things that was always kind of a mystery was how much power did this car make? Now, Ford talked about the supercharged V8, the instruments they were doing for the suspension, what they did for the interior, the things they did for the aero, and the horsepower number was never known until now. 815 horsepower, 664 foot-pounds of torque from this V8. High revving, and that's a lot of power. Now, the reason why a lot of people have been talking about it right now is because there's been some action in the muscle car realm, right? In the muscle car category, there's been some things shaking up things, right? That is the ZR1. See, 815 horsepower is nothing to snuff at. Okay, I say that many times before, that we are really very much in a horsepower. I don't want to say wars, but we are callous. We're jaded to numbers now. Like, numbers don't even mean nothing. Folks are like, oh, you got 300 horsepower. I mean, okay, cool. My lawnmower might got that. Like, the numbers now are so high that if you don't start off as 4 figures, most people may not even lift their head up. I know people that don't really even care if the numbers aren't front and center. And we used to be the same way. So I'm guilty of it as well. We used to also do the same thing. Reading No Road and Track, Car and Driver, Motor Trend, Automobile Magazine, flipping to the stats. What's the 0 to 60? What's the 0 to 100? What's the horsepower? What's the number it costs, right? That is a thing. It's always going to be a thing. Though there should be a little bit of a understanding of what things are going, or what's happening when it comes to cars. And here's why I'm saying that. The ZR1 gets announced as 1,064 horsepower, which is absurd, okay? But it will not cost $325,000. And that is where I've seen some people talk about the GTD and say, I don't even know if it's worth it when it comes to the price. And they are correct if the numbers are the only thing that we're looking at, right? If we're only looking at numbers, if we're looking at a GTD, if we're looking at ZR1s and everything else, and Lamborghinis, and, well, not Lamborghinis. Those may not be a good example because there's some other intangibles with that I can speak to as well. But as far as muscle cars, right? We got the ZR1 was 1,064 horsepower. It won't cost $325,000. It probably costs maybe 200,000. And then you have the Zora, which is the same motor and drivetrain as the ZR1 with added electric powertrains like the E-Ray. And they're talking about that could have 1,200 plus horsepower. And that would cost a little bit over 200. So you're talking about a 400 horsepower jump in power at the very top when it comes compared to the GTD, or 200 plus with the ZR1. That's a substantial amount of horsepower, especially if you compare it back to the numbers saying this is 325,000. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, the ZR1's 200,000. That's 125 grand worth of savings. It's a big deal. But here's what I'm going to say. Here's my little pushback. Some of these cars aren't about the numbers, even though they have numbers being plastered everywhere. Some of it is about exclusivity. If the GTD only is going to have 2,000 units out on the market, and the ZR1 is going to be built for as long as Chevrolet can sell how many ZR1s they can, then there are people that are going to look at the GTD and say, I'm here for a unique experience, specifically a Mustang experience, or I want to see what Ford can do when they put all of their know-how and racing pedigree into the Mustang. The same one I see running around the GT3 class, I want to see what that's like on the street. That's where the GTD comes in. There might be people that have a plethora of other cars in their collection, Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Porsches and Koenigseggs and Paganis, whatever it may be. They might have access to whatever car it is they want, but they look at this and say, yeah, but that's unique. And the price point keeps it very small, the circle small. You might think I'm crazy because I'm driving a $300,000 Mustang, but I'm looking at it like, yeah, but I can go and get a ZR1 at any time. You can't get one of these at any time. I can go get a Huracan. I can go get a Terramario. I've already said it wrong. I can go get the new Lamborghini anytime. I can go get a Porsche GT3 at any time, but I can't get a GTD. And that is what I think separates a little bit of why the Mustang one I still think is very interesting and very cool, regardless of the price point, because one, I can't even afford the ZR1, so it don't even matter. So for me, it's more of like, hey, if you had the means to just get whatever you wanted for whatever amount of money from whatever manufacturer, I'd get a GTD as well. Like, why not? Let's increase the exclusivity and the experience of the car. And that is where I think it falls in line. And there are a lot of cars like that. I had someone explain to me, and I'm going off a little bit of a tangent, but it has a point. Someone had talked to me about the GR Corolla, right? And one of the things they were talking about was the power. And they said, hey, I heard that it takes a lot of money to make, let's say, 400 wheel horsepower. And I was like, I mean, it takes some money. Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to do it yourself, you're going to pay for labor. And labor is really where the money really kicks in and kicks you in the back. And they were like, yeah, I heard this guy had built XYZ for like 40,000 and he made like this much horsepower, or I heard you need at least like 7,000 to get cams and X, Y, and Z. And he's like, oh, I can go get this car over here and I can spend less and get this much horsepower out of it. I don't think this car is worth it. And I responded, I said, hey, if your sole purpose of liking the car is what numbers it can put up from a horsepower range, from a dyno range, from a drag strip, quarter mile time, then, I mean, that is your prerogative, but I kind of feel sorry for you because you're going to miss out on a lot of cars and a lot of experiences if all you see is on the paper what it does from 0 to 60 or what the motor puts out. And if that's all you care about, if that is your MO, if you're like, listen, I don't care about nothing else but them horsepower numbers, then I understand. Then I can say, you know what, in that regard, let it be what it is. But you can't discount the car because it doesn't match the numbers that you want. I always think of all the other cars in the world. There's somebody right now who wakes up in the morning on Sunday, starts up an old 60s Camaro. There's somebody that's in a VW bus. There's somebody in the MK2 Volkswagen. There's somebody driving a 964 Porsche. There are people driving these cars, and these things is not the fastest thing in the world. I talked to a gentleman at a little car thing we do every Sunday in Houston called Catalina. He has an NSX. And we talked about that too and said, listen, the NSX ain't fast, a stock one by today's standards. But where can you get the experience of a low-sitting, two-seat, mid-engine Honda at that pedigree when it was produced at that time? You can't. There are none. They don't even make the S2000 anymore. And the latest NSX is no longer being made anyways. So the point of it is about experiences, about driving the cars, about having something that is unique. It doesn't have to be the fastest thing in the world. And I think that's what happens with these numbers. The numbers are cool. I'm not going to say I'm a person that's like not looking at the numbers too. 1,064 in the ZR1 is a cool thing. 815 in a Mustang is a cool thing. But when you add in the price tag and the price point, and then everybody starts fine-tooth combing everything, and then everything has to be justified. There are people that, like I said, argue the GR Corolla is too expensive for what the horsepower is. I can get X, Y, and Z in another type of car. And I always say, hey, you got to go for what you want to go for. But as a car enthusiast, my whole MO is, how is the experience driving the car? Like, that's what we're here for. We're here to experience the cars, because once these things are gone, once there is no more GTDs and GR Corollas and Type Rs and 911s, when this stuff might look a little bit too futuristic or it might be a little bit too numb, we're all going to sit around in group chats hearkening back to the time when you could go get a little small car with a manual transmission and rip up the gears up and down the mountain road and not to worry about anything, or just having a good experience. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, moving on to some other news that happened today. Cobb tuning. And if you're not familiar with the aftermarket world, especially the Subaru aftermarket world, Cobb tuning isn't a name that may, recollect something in your head. But a while back, like this case that they have been fined $2.9 million to settle a case that they have with the EPA for selling devices, the access port, that was defeating emissions inside of cars. Now, this case is old because this is dating back to some device they sold all the way back in 2015. The news right now is more like a formality. They have to pay this much, which was dictated by the fact that the government in that case said their inability to pay a higher fine is why we stopped at $2.9 million. Now, access port is a little device plugged into a computer, changes things like boost and boost control, mainly to boost up the power of the car. You can do it with the tuner to change the parameters in it. It's a known piece in the aftermarket tuning world. However, what happened to access to Cobb tuning, it happens all over, right? Because just today, again, some other diesel shop was fined for selling multiple cheating devices that, skip past the emissions regulations for the diesel engines. So this happens enough that the EPA is going around to any big company, and Access Port and Cobb Tuning were one of the biggest companies. Not to say there aren't smaller companies tuning cars and maybe doing some illegal things on the side too, but Cobb Tuning was in the forefront, one of the larger companies. So they have cleaned up their act for a while now. Almost everything that they make now is carb legal, which is cool, because if you live in a place like California or any other state that is very strict on the regulations or the modifications you do to a car, Cobb Tuning at least gives you the ability to have carb legal things and still have fun and play and modify and do things with the car. That's the whole point of this whole entire thing with the aftermarket. So they had that in the news today. It doesn't mean that they're out of business, because right now in the aftermarket wheel world, there's bankruptcies happening left or right now. We just had the Hoonigan one. There's one from Wheel Pros. A lot of this is equity firms dumping debt, putting debt in there, selling off the company, keeping the name, rebranding, rebooting. It's unfortunate. It's really you can't argue the owners. If I'm sitting at a table and I made up a brand like Hoonigan and they come with wild numbers. If people want to know why people are selling these companies, it's because the numbers cannot be walked away from. Back to the numbers thing, right? If somebody comes to you and says, hey, you started this company, you're doing great, you make, I don't know, $1 million a year, we want to give you $40 million for the whole thing. Listen, man, listen. A lot of people are going to sit there and say, I can get back to spending more time with my family. I can travel the world. I can buy whatever car I want. I can modify whatever I want. I can kind of go do some more passion projects. A lot of people are going to say, there you go. You can have it. Now, getting into a really, really interesting car. So Lotus has been kind of interesting, right? Because one of the things they made that I didn't like was that electric SUV they made. I think it was called the Elytra or something. It just looked too funky. And I was like, heavy SUV, Lotus, it just didn't. And I don't even know what state it's in right now. It may have been something that they took off the drawing board because everybody's EV ambitions have been modified to the climate that we're in now with how car sales are doing, is how people are feeling towards EV. So I don't even know if that even made it to production in that degree. Maybe a few of them did, maybe it did, I just don't remember. But regardless, it wasn't one of their shiny points to me. But today, though, they announced a concept car called the Theory One. And this is straight out of sci-fi, straight out of our imagination. If you drew up a car as a kid, it's another one of those type of concepts. Wedge style, if you drew up something wild and said, what does 2075 Lotus look like? It's what's on the screen right now. I love how this looks for a couple reasons. One of them is the lack of restraint. See, concept cars, especially EV ones, I'm in the camp that's like, if we're going to build EV cars, you don't have to deal with packaging of an engine. You don't have to deal with cooling of an engine and all the plumbing and components that need to cool down an engine, especially if you're talking about high horsepower. You don't need to sculpt anything around it. You have an electric motor, which is small and compact in size. You got some batteries. You can have fun, which means we should be seeing cars that look crazy, especially super and hyper cars. Like the Rimac Nevera is a $2 to $3 million hypercar that's an EV. And while it looks cool, it's still, to me, if I'm going to critique it, looks kind of generic. Because I'm looking at it like, it don't look better than a Bugatti Tourbillon. Don't look better than a Pagani. Definitely not better than Koenigsegg. And those are gas-powered cars who have rules around what they're doing and what they're cooling off. And I look at the Nevera and I'm like, well, all you got to do is there is some cooling for batteries if it's liquid cooled and you got brakes and stuff like that. But this should really, really look completely out of this world. So the Theory One is otherworldly in design. I mean, you see it. The doors, they slide up like on a tracked hinge on the side of the car, complete like butterfly, but it's kind of more rearward facing. And the interior looks like it was either sculpted out of stone or forged carbon, down to the fact that the dashboard, or lack thereof, to be honest, the dashboard looks like the front bumper of a car, like two big air intakes on the side, steering wheel in the middle. Steering wheel is small. It's not a yoke style, but definitely like an F1 style with a screen in the middle. And there is a screen on the dash. However, even though it's a wraparound panoramic dash, it's not as obnoxious as what they put in the Escalade. It is more integrated where you can still see the information. Driver has the display information in front of it. The seat in this middle and the two seats flanking the driver or the passengers, you have like a sculpted bucket seat out inside of the monocoque. Like whatever the carbon fiber material is, this bucket seat was formed out of it. This is a cool stuff. And in the article I was reading from, a few articles that most people said, I don't see this coming in production. And I kind of differ from that because I was thinking, if we're making electric cars and the only thing that you really need to figure out is one, I guess, crash regulations, that's probably what's going to stop a lot of this design from reaching, reality. But interior wise and technology wise, I look at it like, hey, if we're spending $2-3 million on these cars and people are happily forking money over, then go ahead and do the same thing for this. Now, granted, an electric version or electric hypercar in the $2-3 million range has to do battle with Koenigsegg, Pagani, Gunther Works, Singer, all these bespoke cars that are very visceral, very much connected to the driver. And so this one, it has the power, 70 kilowatt battery rated at north of 980 horsepower, 0 to 60, 2.5 seconds, top speed a little bit under 200 miles an hour, they said. Range of 250 miles, and the entire thing is weighing about 3,500 pounds, which is in EV land, that's a feather. Okay. To do all that in a 3,500 pound chassis, that's mad light. Now, the problem that they would have, or Lotus is going to have, is that people are going to look at this car and say, now, what if you put a V8 in there? Or what if you put some motor in there? And that is where they're going to say, well, we can't design it like this because if you look at this design, we may not have thought about the cooling. We might have been thinking about aerodynamics, but we weren't thinking about air going into air intakes and making its way to a motor. And then you got to make a drivetrain, and then you got to make the dynamics of it. It is much harder to make an ICE power car than it is to make an EV one. I don't know what Lotus is going to do with this. If some of these design elements make it to like a redesign, a Spirit or a Lease or some other supercar that they're going to make, or sports car in that realm, all the better. But seeing the concept is dope, because I hope something from this makes its way down the assembly line. Like, you can make a new Elise, you can make it as a sports compact, make another something, some sports car from Lotus that has this look. Like right now they have the Mirror, which is to me an amazing sports car because it is the essence of who Lotus is. It's simple, but it performs. It's lightweight. It looks good. It sounds good. It has a manual. It's V6. It's just all those things that people say, what happened to the true driver engaging sports cars? And that's one of them, Lotus and Mirror. So I don't know what they're going to do with this Theory 1. It's obviously thrown out there because they are now looking towards the future. They're looking for what is their design language moving forward. Maybe it's applied to ICE vehicles. Maybe it's only applied to EVs. I personally think that if you're going to do an EV, I say it all the time, give me the George Jetson sounds, make it look like it fell out of a sci-fi movie, and let's just have fun. Now, getting back into we're getting into some more electric vehicle foolishness, not in a good way. Fisker. The Fisker owners, they cannot catch a break. I feel for them, like for real. These guys and gals cannot catch a break. So Fisker is already out. It's bankrupt. We already know. You've seen the news. If you got a Fisker right now, Godspeed. They're selling for pennies on the dollar. But the owners who are holding on to a Fisker, who might say it's still a good car, and it wasn't a bad car, the business was bad, not the car, they're being held up with the responsibility of paying for recalls. Now, if you know what a recall is, something happens to a car, they got to recall it, change out the part, aka like Toyota's doing with the Tundra motor, or just recently now they recalled the Tacoma transmission because those have been failing. I talked about this in a podcast episode a while back. But Fisker owners are going to get the part for free, whatever the recall is, and some of this is pertaining to safety features on the vehicle. Fisker will supply the part, but in a bulletin said, however, we're sorry for the inconvenience, but you need to go find a facility to repair the part for you, and you got to come out of pocket. I want you to look around your local neighborhood and ask yourself, how many shops are invested in working on Fisker SUVs or have the know-how to? Now, maybe there's an EV shop that can just kind of take their information they may have on a Tesla or a Rivian or some other electric car and transfer it over to what Fisker was doing. But I guarantee there are a lot of owners who are looking at this thinking, so I'm going to get the part. I got to go take my car over to some place to have them replace the part. Because it's an EV, you're probably getting hit with a lot larger labor rates because of what they have to do and what they have to take off. It's a lose right now. Because let's just say the part is free. The labor is $10,000. Hey, listen, guess what? We ain't doing that recall. Listen, if there isn't a YouTube video, I'm just riding till the wheels fall off. Okay, that's just what it has to be, and that's the unfortunate thing. It's just all bad. If you have a YouTube channel like Rich Rebuilds, who buys electric cars and rebuilds them and makes content and things out of it, it makes sense to go get a Fisker for the bottom dollar. But if you're really trying to drive one every day to work, to commute, to have one as a family vehicle, man, no. Just stay away, all the way away. It ain't worth your time. If you're going to get SUVs, though, there is one that is out by good old Nissan. And hey, this is a second podcast in a row I'm shining some light on Nissan. I don't know what's going on over there, but they're working. They're working. See, the Armada was redesigned. I said, hey, I like how this looks. It's simple. It's boxy. But hey, we're going the right direction. It's not gonna, like I said, it's not gonna, win the prize of, vehicular design. But we're going a good direction, and they're at it again. The Nissan Kicks. Now I will say this: The Nissan Kicks name, I just, man, that name is just, it's just so, man. It's like they were really sitting in that think tank and they said, we got to think of a name for our next compact SUV. And somebody said Kicks. I'm sure it was something like it's hip, let's kick it, let's do the kickback. Me and my friends are going to kick it over here. Oh, the Nissan Kicks. I'm sure that's probably where it came from. I'm still would have been in that room saying, let's not do that to ourselves. Okay. But anyways, Nissan has redesigned the Kicks. It looks substantially better than the previous Kicks. You see it on the screen. If you notice, there's a little bit of a design language happening. The front grills of these cars are very straightforward, flat, aggressive. It does. I will say this does give me a little bit of the Kia EV9 vibes when it comes to how they squared off the front end of it, but it does look a lot better, cleaner. It's nothing to write home about. We're talking about a compact SUV, but in the realm of cars like CRVs and RAV4s and Kia Seltos and other like the Volkswagen Taos, all the subcompact cars, and those cost a lot more. They all have a certain look, and it's matching the look of that. You do get 140 horsepower 4-cylinder, 2-liter 4-cylinder, which it could use a little bit more. I mean, like 25 horsepower more might help it a lot, but listen, we're not here because of, horsepower. There are trim levels though, and that's what I really want to jump to. The point of me talking about this car is because when I saw it, I said, this does look really clean, but it was the price point that had me saying, hey, that's actually, you know what? Credit where credit's due. That is a good deal. The SV and SR models of this car come complete with 12.3-inch digital displays, 360 display, panoramic sunroofs, a Bose audio system, 10-speaker, heated front seats, all-wheel drive. You can get LED signature stereo speaker. You can get a premium package. You can get headrest speakers in the Bose 10-speaker setup, which, hey, I ain't mad at that. I've heard that from the reviews in the first drives. They're like, that sound system is impressive. And you get all of that in a package that starts at $23,000 and gets all the way up to $29,000. And that to me is where I'm going to give them their praise and give them their flowers. In the realm of SUVs right now, like if you go and buy a RAV4 or a CRV, you're paying over $29,000. It's just what it is. You're probably getting closer to 40. And if you try to get down to this point in a car, you're either going to end up at like some small subcompact sedan and rarely an SUV. So if you're telling me you can max out a Kicks completely, like I said, you're not getting a great amount of horsepower. It may not merge into, don't try to jump in front of that semi doing 85 on I-10. Like, let's not do that. Okay. But everyday driving, commuting, if you wanted an SUV with some utility to carry a few kids, a dog, a pet, all those things, it's not breaking the bank. And that is what we need more of. And that's where I will say, hey, listen, given their props where they are right now, and given that Nissan is really trying to push sales, you probably get some really good deals on this, including interest rate or incentives for you to buy it and money off. So if you go from the base one, $23,000, which is well equipped, you get up to the higher trim models, which probably makes it more of an enjoyable car, even down to the interior. If you see it in this picture, if you're watching the video, red leather, red accents, gray leather. Steering wheel is a nice sporty look because the Kicks one, the whole idea of the car is that it is like the sporty version of a compact SUV, okay? So they're going to give you somewhat of a flat bottom. They're going to give you red accents everywhere. They said that the look of it on the outside I'm laughing because it's funny. They said it was supposed to emulate like a football player. And from the front grille, so I'm thinking like football helmet, front grille, you see the top with this one that has like the red two-tone that kind of slicks back. I guess you can kind of see a helmet. You know what this reminds me of too? And I don't know if anybody remembers this, but a long time ago, Mini had made the Mini convertible and they made the Mini coupe. And the designer of the Mini coupe, I always remember this, said he designed the roof like his son wearing or some kid wearing a baseball cap backwards. Because if you look at the Mini coupe, it looks like it's a hat on backwards. And that's what he said. He designed that. So when they said this about the helmet in football or a football player, I said, oh, I can kind of see that. I mean, I've heard this idea of trying to push it after something that you can recognize. And all around though, like I said, the way it looks, the way it's designed, what you get in the packaging, even down to the wheel design, which is kind of like a funky disc 3-spoke design, but the overall car is good. I mean, for the price point, for the idea of what this is, for anybody that's looking for a compact SUV, I'm not mad. Now, I would definitely not get the gray and red. I think that doesn't really help out this color that much. It's a little too bland, but just in general, good job, Nissan. I mean, like, hey, things is turning around because they must really be sitting down saying, listen, we got to do something, because if we don't do something soon enough, it ain't going to look too good for our lineup. Now, to wrap this up, right? Shout out to Nissan again. Nice on the Nissan Kicks. And I kind of want to drive one of those. I just want to test them out. Like I said, my aim with this podcast is get to the test drives. And I'm going to get there. Trust me. I've been in some talks. I'm going to get there. And when I do, I'm going to throw my flair on it. I'm going to throw my information on it. I'm going to throw my little sauce, my little seasoning, my little sazon on the car review space, because I have something to add to it. Now, GR Corolla Updates. The most important segment. No, but GR Corolla Updates. I put on a new part. Round of applause for me doing that in 95-degree weather. But I put on the MST Performance version 2 intake. Now, I'm very fortunate and thankful to be able to work with some companies, even in my small YouTuber space, as they say. You know, I'm gonna be big YouTube in a matter of time. Don't you worry if the numbers matter that much to me. But because of what I've done for them and what I've done for the content, I was privileged enough to be able to work out and work with them on their V2 version, which is a completely different intake design. You can go check out the video. I'm not gonna, spend too much time speaking about it on the podcast, but if you haven't, my podcast name is my YouTube name. You just search me up. If you want to see this in video format on YouTube, go watch it on YouTube. If you want to see me modifying the GR Corolla or having an interview or reviewing electric car, my first car review I kind of did in Mexico was a BYD car. So if you want to go see that was my first one I did, real guerrilla style. But hey, we got it in and we got it done. And modifying the car. So the GR Corolla is doing great. I did updates to the outside of it. I put videos up for that. I changed out the intake. We got to go do a test drive. I'm got to go talk about the sound difference. I need to team up with my friend who has the version 1 intake like I had on my car. He still has it on his. I need to team up with him. I want to team up with somebody else who has a 6-element intake. And I want to get them all together and we're going to have a little bit of a shootout. Not documented horsepower numbers because we don't have a dyno, but I want to show people what it sounds like from the outside, what it sounds like from the inside, what it sounds like revving, just so they can get an idea. Because even though the main point of performance parts is added performance, there is a point of it that is, some of it is oral. It is, what do I hear? How does it sound? Does it sound better? And exhaust on most cars does give you more power, but we care about the sound. More power and it sound like trash, I don't care. I'm not having it. Just give me give me no more power gains, but it sounds good. I'd rather take that. So that's what's going on with the GR Corolla. We got other ideas coming. I got some parts I want to talk about. There is something I want to speak about when it comes to a certain car model they have coming out called the GRMN. Because at Nürburgring, there's a GR Corolla that I posted that's been tested around that looks not like a Morizo, doesn't look like the 2025 Circuit Edition, has a much bigger wing, got hood, it got vents everywhere. Something's going on. Now, I was going to talk about it in this podcast, but I got an idea for a video I'm going to shoot where I'm talking about it there. So you got to check out the YouTube channel for that. But Toyota's working on some special version of the GR Corolla. They haven't said anything, but it ain't running around the test track in camouflage for no reason. Something's going on. I want to get to the bottom of it. Other than that, as I always say, do as you wish and do as you may. I'm glad you joined me again. Cameron Biggs, your host. This is the CarQuicks podcast. I will see you soon. I'm going to see you soon at SEMA too. Oh, that rhymed. That's crazy. I'll see you soon. Glad you enjoyed. I'll see y'all around for the next one. Until then, take care of yourself. I'll be back later. Peace.